Instead of starting with an introduction about the company, what I thought we would do is speak about what excites you about this industry. Personally, what makes you get up in the morning and start thinking about coming to work?
I think if I look at my own profile and what I've done, if I put in two boxes, one is the product side. Most part of my career has been dealing with products. So suddenly it was a switch to a service sector, delivery side, healthcare delivery service. So I think that's one, because here the time is real essence. So that's one part which excites me, because it always keeps you on toes to deliver a service. The second is the domain itself, which is healthcare, because other than this commercial issues of valuation and profitability, you are actually serving the society. So, and currently, actually, we are in the middle of it. In Delhi, as you know, there's a sort of a dengue attack, and there are so many patients coming in. And what really excites is that this industry gives you an opportunity to serve the society. I think personally, that's what excites me the most. I'll come back to you maybe a little later on the topic which we have on scale-up and professionalization.
Remember, I'm a physician, so the motivation for me, what wakes me up in the morning to go to work, is directly related to the work. So we have super specialty hospitals across metro, tier 2 and tier 3 cities, which would mean basically cutting-edge multi-specialty, intensive cares, etc. Now, what motivates me into this space is the lack of healthcare in that particular segment across the different cities. And when patients who are very critical come to ICU like ours, they double their chances of survival than going into ordinary places. And so if in a given day we have some 20 patients out there, I can tell you that half a dozen of them at least would live to see another day thanks for their decision of coming to an ICU like ours. So that's half a dozen people who are living, half a dozen family members who have not lost their family member every day. That is the biggest motivation for me in ramping up and doing this whole thing, to bridge this particular gap and make it at a price and service which is affordable. So it's taking quality care to the doorsteps of the people. That's the big motivation for me.
I've been with IVFA for over 13 years, and we have always looked at healthcare right from the beginning. Our first investment was in 2001. So we have been looking at this sector for a long time. And what really motivates me to keep engaged with this sector is the fast evolution that is here in this sector. I mean, very few industries will evolve so fast. And part of it, I think, is because of the huge market demand that is there for healthcare, and yet the kind of models which have evolved in India are very unique, and as a result we are able to give affordable healthcare. So there are constant challenges, constant evolution in this industry. If you look at other countries, healthcare is often ossified in terms of systems. I mean, the public healthcare systems which dominate West are really unchanging for many, many years. That's not the case in India. It's always exciting. In the last 5 years, we have so many new models of ambulatory care. You have single specialty hospitals coming up, which are pretty much dominating eye care now. So there is always something new happening now. And the other challenge which I see now, and which is actually playing out, is on the large hospital side, you are seeing consolidation, efficiencies, and scaling up happening. This is a really exciting time for healthcare, because I think in the next 20 years, there is going to be huge urbanization. And it's going to be a challenge to actually provide for healthcare for all of them, all the people who come to the cities. And newer models have to evolve, and that will keep this industry very exciting, I think.
Thank you. So we're talking about serving the society, creating access, and the fast pace of growth. And between, when all this is happening, we're also thinking about scaling the impact, scaling the reach, scaling the investments. And is there a dichotomy that you see in your experience, Mr. Manchanda, when you joined this organization, PathLabs? It was a small company, and then you've transformed it into a leading organization in the country. Do you see a dichotomy in scale and the impact, or is there a pressure there?
See, the first thing is, and I presume that in audience there are entrepreneurs and there are private equity people, and they come together actually to see that you are able to multiply your investments. And that will only happen when you scale up. So I think the moment these two entities come together, so eventually implicit reason or explicit reason for these two entities to come together is to really grow the business. And in my experience, it's a huge change not only for the promoter, but for the entire organization. And I think these are two different points where, let's say, if you are X and you want to become 5X in 3 years or whatever time you put together your business plan, it's very important for everybody to know that how that number is going to come. And everybody should be aligned that there is going to be a change process, because if you continue to do things the way it was happening before, that plan will remain on paper. And in my experience, the first change which has to come immediately after the investment is made into the business is to put together a management team and who is the leader of the team. And healthcare brings a little more complexity to this concept compared to my earlier experiences, because of the diverse experience which is required to deliver healthcare. You have a huge talent which is in the area of medical field, but that talent is very good in healthcare, but that talent actually may not be sufficient to scale up the business. Because there is to whatever we say, in my experience, there is a lacuna, there is a sort of a deficiency on the commercial acumen on the other side. But then you bring people from outside, like me, who come from other industries, then these people have understanding of management, but they don't understand medical side. And it creates complexity in leading these set of people who are from different backgrounds. So to my mind, I think business leadership is extremely important for any healthcare organization. And the person's ability to lead people who are from different backgrounds is very important. Second experience I have seen, when you actually go down, build teams, there is always a tendency, it's a human nature we end up liking guys who are very similar to us. And there is a tendency to actually clone the organization, because you end up hiring people who are very similar to your experience. You like what is your comfort zone. You don't like conflicting situations. My tip would be, if you are out there to build a management team, make sure that what is the competency each person brings on table. If you try to hire 10 guys with a similar competency, you are heading for a disaster. So building professional team, and I will split in two parts. One is the leadership part, and the leader actually should be able to lead a team which is diverse in profile. Because otherwise you will have actually every day a conflict situation, and where egos are much bigger than the intellect in the room, and it becomes a very difficult situation to handle. So that is on the team part. And the second important part, which I would say in my experience, is you actually have to invest behind systems and processes well before actually you see them giving you results. And that is actually a change management process. And I'll give you a personal example, again from my current experience. See, when you are a startup or an early stage, when the model is tested and proven, everything happens under your nose as a promoter. And I'm looking at as a professional CEO come promoter as one person. So I'm not getting into complexity of these two entities. Everything happens under your nose. And when you scale up, and you're not looking at 3 months from now scale up, 1 year from now scale up. You actually have to see how an organization would look like 5 years from now. And then you have to take those actions today, what an organization would look like 5 years from now. When I came, company size was about 40 crore. Today we are at 600 crore. Now these changes won't happen overnight. And what we invested that time in processes was keeping an eye on at least, if not 600 crore, definitely in my mind, it was a 300 crore organization. The good news was that I know in my current ecosystem, 300 crore is seen as a big company. And fortunately for me, I came from a setup where my division size where I was working in the year 99 was 1200 crore. So when you sign a check of 1 crore, to me, it is not something a big deal. But in a small organization, signing a check of 1 crore means everybody knows there's a big investment going on. And everybody tends to see that who is signing the check. So I think it's important to have a mindset of a scaled-up organization and put systems and processes in place. Like simple thing like check signing authority. Now in a small organization, a check is signed by the top guy. And it's symbolic. People see that power center is the person, it lies with the person who signs the check. But I came from a setup where check signing is a clerical job. Because your control lies at the time of making decision, control doesn't lie at the time of signing a check. So the reason I'm taking this example to convey a point that you actually have to have systems and processes in place. And third, in my experience is if you hire people, you have systems and processes, then give them space to do their job. Less interference you have from the top, better it will be for the organization and the growth. I think these are 3 things I would want to share from my current experience.
Very interesting points. I think it's very pertinent to, a lot of other organizations as well as we scale up. And Dr. Vikram, I wanted to ask you, you came from the other angle. Yours is a 3rd generation medical practice and you decided to scale it up. And like Rajan mentioned in the morning, it's very difficult to let it go. So how did you decide to let it grow as opposed to let it go?
First of all, these hospitals were something which I started about a decade ago. So though I come as a 3rd generation doctor, the practice and everything is from, it's a different thing. It was from a clinic and we moved into the hospitals scene. So when I started this journey, I was like, yeah, fine. If I have started it, I can oversee it and I can take those chances. So there's always been a sense of attached detachment, as I would like to call it. Now, it might be a family of us who are promoters, but it's different. You have to just go through peel the layers and just understand that you can have a hospital where all the family members are doctors and they are key functionaries in the hospital running key specialties. That was not the case at Vikram. I made sure that though we have 4 or 5 doctors in the family, none of us were practicing any particular line and say, okay, now he becomes the head of, say, cardiology or radiology, etc. It wasn't like a family run and at a doctor level. It is fully professionally managed, and the best doctors I can get for each of the specialty were the people who run the show. With that being the case, the promoter's shareholding may be family driven, but on the ground, there is no family face practicing clinical medicine. Whereas when you talk of a family business, you think in terms of family actually running the business on the ground, no matter who the shareholding is. So that is one fundamental difference. So there is no such thing like, okay, the OT theaters is ours, etc., and we have to compete, and the rest have to compete with the owners for space. That is never the case. Second, when it comes to the scaling, in about a 5-6 year period, we may have scaled about 4 times in size and 5-6 times in revenue. One of the things I have understood is healthcare is more like a decade time frame, whereas private equity is more like half a decade time frame. So is private equity the right vehicle in the first place for healthcare to scale up? It's something which I would like the finance guys to actually look at it. There should be something which can give an exit over a decade rather than something over a 5-6 year period. Because you see, in tertiary care specialty hospitals like, say, metro cities, your break-even may be less than 1,000 days, or around 800,000 days. When you go to a tier 2 city, it is another year more, that is 1,300, 1,400 days. You move to a tier 3, you add another year more. So you're talking of 2.5, 3 years, 3 to 3.5 years, and 3.5 to 4 years. And this is after the 1.5 years which you have taken to build the practice, build the place. So what happens is, I don't see how a private equity who would want to exit with great value at the end of 5th year, at the time of break even, get a great value, especially in bad economic conditions, because everybody has, maybe a year later, a year and a half later makes all the difference.
Right.
So so that makes hospitals our size interesting.
Right.
Because we have a better future and the risk process is over with.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Arte, you have had a special place in this industry because you've backed some of the leading names. Have you any 3 or 4 characteristics or instances that you can share where you think that it's very important or people have done it to scale their business and it's very relevant to the entrepreneurs?
I think looking back over the many years that I've been associated with this industry, I am really impressed with the progress that has been made. Having said that, I think many of the firms today, that is the hospitals or the chains, today are at the early stage where, at the stage where we first invested in a company in 2001. And if you look at that, I think many of the points made by Om are very relevant, because when we invested, let me give you an example there. In that hospital, it was an extremely successful hospital and run by exceptionally good doctors. There was no marketing department yet. You never had a problem filling up all the beds. There was, really speaking, no chartered accountant even in the whole hospital, and a company which was a reasonably sized company at that point of time. There were no budgets. So, all of us who come from industry work on budgets. That means you have a plan for the year before you begin the year. And then you try to achieve that plan in different ways. And you may or may not achieve everything that is planned. But you need to have a plan. Otherwise, at the end of the year, you don't know whether you're successful or not. Did you do a good job or not? That's a very basic thing. So there were no budgets. And this was a running hospital. And always full. And the management team was all the doctors who were great at practice and wanted to practice. Each one of them was an exceptional doctor who wanted to continue practice. So the organization was run in the spare time of the doctors. So from here, I think today where you see the same firm, I think there's a dramatic transformation. The first budget I remember was made, because in budget you need estimates of various costs, various things. You say that I am going to target so much per bed, so much for an operation, so much and then there has to be cost which you have to budget. And the first budget was made by actually going around asking the doctors for estimates. How much do you think, how much time each of these operations takes? What kind of medicines are used and what kind of surgical requirements are there? How many catheters do you use in this? How many? And you actually build up a cost structure under that. And obviously we were very wrong. The first budget which came out, we kept on reviewing every 3 months and benchmarking it against. And as we got, at the end of 1 year, we were a lot better and the next budget was far superior.
Well, what was the challenges that you faced in professionalizing? And this question is open to all of you. What are the challenges you face in attracting the right talent, professionalizing the entire system, and even investing in the right systems and tools, because you're building up the industry from ground up?
See, I think, let me put it this way. I think when I was the first hire when the investment was made in 2005, and I presume why I looked at having worked for large organizations like Hindustan Lever and Ranbaxy, not the diagnostic, I was with part of pharma setup. And coming to a setup like this, I personally felt that the trait which people who would want to come to a setup like this, I think capability is not an issue. I think you can always hire people who are capable of running a commercial organization. But the real thing which you have to look at is that, is this guy too much giving weightage to the big names, or is he a guy who actually wants to take a plunge and wants to make something big? Now, there are two things in this for anyone to take a plunge like this. One is, of course, we all have careers, we all want to make financial gains. I think one thing which worked in our favor to build a senior management team, because we had an ESOP structure where all our incentives were aligned to the growth of organization. So the entire path was clearly laid out, at least for the management team, which was going to get built. So I think that's one thing which was critical. And why it appeals to professionals is because many professionals want to be on their own, but they can't take the risk. But this is somewhere in the middle path where you can do both. It's an entrepreneurial venture. At the same time, it may not be that kind of gains as one would do as an entrepreneur, but reasonable enough to be happy about. The second is there is a certain trait where the way we actually get grown in large organizations very vertically. You have a sales and marketing, you have a finance function, you have this. There are some guys who have desire to do everything in one go at a very early age, which is an entrepreneurial trait. So I think it was very important for me to look for guys who really want to take charge of this. The second thing which helped is once I came on board, I was able to attract a lot of people from corporate world on my background itself, because they knew that this guy has taken risks, so there must be something right. I took a risk because investors put in money. I thought that they have done some homework. So it was like a chain reaction. So one after the other, people started coming in. And in my view, your personal network really helps. It's not a typical search. When you give a job to a search firm, they list out something. I think you need to explore your own personal network and see who are the guys you think can actually take a job like this. So that was challenge on building team. The second was, once you build team, life wasn't so easy. Because you're dealing with two emotions at the same time. First, probably I think 6-7 months or 1 year, you were struggling whether you've done the right thing or not. And the guys whom you've hired, everybody will come and tell you, boss, I have come because you've come here. So they are struggling with their own decision. So you're carrying this load on you. On one side, you have to deliver results. Other side, you are also struggling whether you've done the right thing in your career or not, because you've taken this decision peak of your career. And second is the team which you have built, they also look up to you. And I think somewhere, my experience is there's no harm in sharing these anxiety with everybody, including the board. Because even board also has anxiety whether they have built the right team, because if it doesn't work, it can affect the entire investment which has been. So it's important to build that trust between all the stakeholders, saying that, okay, we are all into it, we'll all swim and sink together. If it works, everybody will benefit. And I think that trust building is very important. And third is that everybody is not aligned, actually. You see, guys, 10, 12 guys at the top may be aligned to bring out a change. But in a service sector, especially healthcare delivery, it's all through people. And I don't know, I'm sure most healthcare delivery overheads cost, 50% is people. And they are of different profiles altogether. Like say in my case, there are guys who are bringing sample from point of collection to point of testing. They are getting only about 8,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees salary at a 45-degree temperature on a bike bringing sample, versus this nice Excel sheet the CEO is making. There is no connect as to what he is doing and what I'm trying to do. It's very important to really set the context and keep telling your organization as to why we are doing this. And personally, I feel very happy. I think you asked this question, what excites me. When I joined the company, there were about 250 or 300 employees. Today, we have 4,000 employees. And it really gives me a great pleasure when I actually run an organization which is extremely profitable, because it gives them not only employment, but a sense of security as well. That it's led by a team which is making sure that it's a profitable organization. I think this is what I would like to share.
So let me bring the discussion to a ugly part of our business, which is huge attrition that we see. And particularly when you're trying to professionalize, bring in systems, we see a lot of movement in people. Dr. Vikram, you must have seen this in the industry. How do you, keep your vision on the change when this thing is happening?
I think I've been a little more fortunate than others with attrition. So the challenge where I had to overcome was, on the one hand, you have all these brilliant super specialty doctors, because as a multi-specialty hospital, you're dealing with a lot of cutting edge stuff. So you get a lot of these super specialists, whom I would like to call as sub-specialists, because as you go into one particular portion, so I take care only heart, brain, etc. Instead of calling it super, it's a subspecialty. Remember, they're very brilliant people, and the best of the creamy doctors have gone on to become these specialists. So they are on one side, and then I'm in the middle, and to my other hand are all the chartered accountants and the finance guys. These finance guys don't seem to understand what the doctors say, and the doctors don't get to understand what the finance people are talking about. Because as doctors, we don't get educated in the finance and HR and all those things. So through your growth period, you haven't understood or taught even team building. They're all like, they run single. And then you have to teach them how to run in a team, and then as part of the large thing. So that was the biggest challenge, to make both wings get to talk to each other and understand each other. And that, I believe, was the biggest role I have had over the last few years. The problem which I face in such a situation is the administrator. Who should this administrator be? Because here, when you get in the hospital administrators who are graduated from your regular hospital administrators, how much ever brilliant they may be, they pale into significance, into the smartness of these super specialty doctors who are top A. And they'll look at this guy and say, he was in the back of the class, and he's going to teach me a thing or two. I have the doctors coming and saying, so the tail is going to wag the dog? What's happening here, Vikram? So, and here, these admin are like, I can't get them. So how the hell am I supposed to be in charge of the P&L or the Excel file or your MIS when I can't even exercise my power on them? So you can't pull those doctors out and say, I'm going to teach you Excel and math, because you want them, and because they have 8 hours, 10 hours in a day, and you want them working on the ground. We're not worried about this. So overcoming those kind of challenges and bringing a team in who can understand these kind of things, keeping them along with you, and getting them over, you learn. You make mistakes and you learn, and you know when you're hiring how to go about that. It's not something you can just tell. You just know.
Great. So are there any instances that you've seen where organization tried to scale fairly fast when, even when they are not ready, or is there an optimal or a right time to scale, or is it, have you seen any instances where it has worked or not worked?
I think there are enough examples of organizations which have scaled up too fast and then got stuck somewhere because they have not built the right team or the right systems and processes. I think there are, I don't want to name any organization, but there are people in this industry will know that there are some organizations which are very, very doctor-centric, and the doctor is exceptionally good. There's no doubt about it. And because of his capabilities, his stature, there are many, and his ability to attract other doctors because of his stature, you can get to a very, very quick ramp up, because you can pretty much, any hospital you build, you will be able to fill up and things like that. But at the same time, if you have not built the right systems, processes, and the support team, which I think both Om and Dr. Vikram talked about so much, is very, very important, because that shows up ultimately in the patient experience. Because ultimately, if the patient doesn't know what the doctor does when he's performing surgery, whether he's done a good job or not, he has no clue. He is mostly unconscious at that time. What he sees is the nurse smiling at him when she comes in the morning. Is the injection given, is it painful or not? When he's, sort of getting out of the hospital, how much time does it take for him to, get discharged? Now, these are the kind of things which remain in the patient's mind. And these are also equally important things, because the patient is the ultimate customer. And if these things are not fixed, and this is not a thing a doctor can fix, not his job also, and a waste of his time. So you need an extremely good administrative team to do this. And to me, as Dr. Vikram rightly said, in all the 10 years, 12 years and our investments, we are seeing the biggest challenge is to get that balance right between the clinician and the administrator. This balance, this is always a struggle. It is never going to be going away, but you need a right balance, and the leader in that company has to play a big role in making sure the balance is right. Because, doctors fall in love with technology. They want to buy the latest, the best, irrespective of what it means in terms of, other aspects like the financial aspects. But if healthcare has to be run as a business, then you have to give consideration to those other issues. It's not, it's okay for a charity hospital to actually, which has funds from, people who give it the money, to actually then go in and invest in the best and not care about how much is the utilization and things like that. But if you want to run it as a business, you have no option but to think about what kind of utilization will you have, what will you charge, how will you treat the patients who cannot afford to pay. All this has to be thought through, because even the other area where we usually have a problem between doctors and administration, the number of fee cases that are to be treated. There are doctors being what they are, and and obviously when they see illness, they don't want to send any patient untreated. But you have to have the right balance. You have to have other sources of funding for those kind of cases, because healthcare has to be run as a business, and that is an important, and this is a challenge. The doctors, the clinicians' mindset and the administrators think of running it like a business. The right balance has to be found. I don't say that it's only the doctor's fault. I think administrators also need to be understanding that this is not a regular business. This is, you're taking care of human life here. You have to have some flexibility there to actually make these, choices easier for the doctor. So I think there is a right balance to be found, and that is where the main challenge is.
Thank you. I think that's a good note to end this panel discussion, and the takeaways, in addition to building a good team, putting in good processes and systems, is to sort of focus on protecting your values. And most importantly, I think also focusing on putting efforts in changing the mindsets on both sides of the table, both the doctors and the administrators. I want to thank you for your time, and thank you for your patient listening and participation.